What's up, bro?
Freedom African, how you doing?
All right, good, good. I'm assuming we don't. What's up, James? The moderator. No one's greater. Let me see. Turn down the volume on this ambience. I be trying to set the mood. I can't see nothing. Where am I? Oh, okay. Let's Cole get busy. All right, man. These the kind of topics that get you on a list, so I'll understand if you want to recuse yourself.
Hey man, I talked to my boys about this before stuff, like especially like before they go compete or something. I say I don't want you ducking no smoke and we ain't tucking no jury.
All right.
We were having this conversation at work a few days ago, where one of my colleagues was, basically doing what a lot of people do when Israel is aggressive, right? They will say things like, "Oh, I don't really understand what's going on. I don't know enough about it." And I'll say, "Hey, some things are complicated. Some things are just really right and wrong, And we just kind of start walking through, some of the origins of that conflict. And one thing that I did say was that I think it's important to recognize when you can be quiet, but it is a very different conversation to just stand silently when you see wrong things happening. Like I just don't understand how that works.
Well, I mean, people completely lose their moral compasses, and it's really weird to find that the whole, it seems like everybody on the internet then had baby fever. All of a sudden, in the last couple of weeks, less than 2 weeks, dead babies are just a tragedy and so wrong. As if, what do they say? Upwards to 50,000 children die a day in the globe, preventable disease from contaminated water and malnutrition. When the global agricultural system produces more than twice the amount of food we need to consume, over almost 40% of all food that is grown, harvested, and processed is wasted. Water decontamination is a basic science that humans have also mastered, and so it's really funny that the whole world is talking about it's wrong for children to die at this juncture out of nowhere. And it's funny that was the whole. It's funny because it took me back to Go to Meyer. And Go to Meyer, I think you should look, anyone who wants to really understand, how deep and how brutal and how anti-human Zionism is, they should know about Go to Meyer. She was the first female prime minister of Israel. And she was, as bloodthirsty as she was a magnificent propaganda and tactician. And one of her famous quotes was, "We can forgive the Palestinians for killing our children, but we can't forgive them for forcing us to kill theirs." And so they've always used the children. And right-wingers and fascists, if you watch throughout history, even in this country right now, in certain right-wing and fascist and reactionary movements, they always talk about the babies and say, "Will someone think of the children?" And that's always the point when you find people say, "Oh, the children, won't someone think of the children?" You pretty much know they're trying to manipulate you because, children and puppies, when they come at you with that about a very adult situation, not to say that I'm indifferent to the suffering of children, I am not, But when people who facilitate the death of tens of thousands of children a day, meaning, corporate elites, governmental agencies and governmental elites, people who can prevent the death of thousands of children and profit from the death of thousands of children, all of a sudden start saying and promoting in their media, oh, think about the children. It's a scam and a shakedown.
I mean, even like folks that will swear that they're Christians, when they get to talking about something that they disagree with and the impact that it has on children, and I'm just like, wait a minute, bro. There's a whole lot of things that have impacts on children that I ain't heard you say nothing about, and I just think it's, really interesting when you can pick and choose when children shouldn't be murdered.
I'm gonna just have to tell. We have to tell the truth about everything and everybody, even those are things and that we tend to like, right?
Yeah.
I have to say to you, Christianity is very pro dead children. I mean, I don't think it's a contradiction for any Christian to be pro dead children or be indifferent to the death of children. I mean, didn't God kill a bunch of kids for laughing at a bald head man? Didn't God give pretty much sanction, define children as property of the Father?
Hey, my favorite one.
Every firstborn child of Egypt.
Hey, man.
The dead babies under the flood. I mean, I don't know. Look, I think we all love Christianity until some Christian shit happens. But
look, bro, them folks was like, hey, man, we enslaved. God, come get these folks, man. That was the original.
And God, right? Did they say, God, come get the babies?
They want, man, come. We want them to suffer, God. Like, that's why it's like this.
God agreed with it,
man.
But whoa. But you can't blame the people who called down God's retribution, because didn't God know He was going to do it before it was done?
Hey, man, them folks.
Didn't He know me before He formed me in the room?
In the womb, yeah.
Didn't He know what He's going? Doesn't He exist in all times at once? Omnipresent.
All times.
Isn't He all-knowing, omnipotent? And so you can't say it don't. I mean, prayer is probably the most irrelevant activity you can engage in, because God already knows. God, thine will be done. Don't put that off on the Israelites,
bro. Them folks was with the bombings.
I just saying. If I see a Christian said, "Fuck them kids," I'm not going to say they're violating Christianity.
Well,
I'm just going to say, what did He say? If you don't honor thy mother and thy father, what happens to you if you fail to honor thy mother and thy father?
I'm sure there's going to be some smoting and smiting going on.
Yes. I will disagree with a Christian who advocates violence for children, but I will not accuse them of contradicting or going against their faith.
Hey, man.
Because abuse of children is consistent with Christian dogma. And by extension of also Islamic and Judea, Torah, New Testament, and the Quran, pretty much all aligned. Children are property. But anyway, as we proceed, I want to talk, because a lot of people, there's a guy I had been pretty much following for a long time, who's kind of been in my sphere of knowing. I wouldn't say sphere of influence, but I'm pretty sure he's not aware of me, but I've been aware of him since the early 90s, back in the spoken word days. And he used to be a poet, and I was a big fan of the boom poetic vibe chameleon era of the spoken word. That's probably when you was still in diapers, 92, 90, 93. NYC. Anyway, and he's the son of the famous Queen of Fua. And his name is Supernova Slam. And he blocked me the other day because I was sitting at this very desk. I wasn't even really paying attention to anything, but I was at this desk working. And the notification came up that he's gone live. And anyway, he came on live and was talking about violence, and about people condemning violence and attacking Hamas and denouncing Hezbollah and just really going on. And he was like, fuck Hezbollah, fuck Hamas. And I said, do you say fuck the IDF and fuck? And so he said, yes, I'll say fuck the IDF. And I'm like, you didn't until I brought it up. And then I said, and then he was like, no, both of them are wrong. And then I said, I wanted to ask him, do you say fuck the United States military? Because he's a military veteran. And I also wanted, before I could get to that, I said, you can't both sides genocide. But he blocked me. He blocked me. So I don't know where I'm going to get my chlorophyll. and I guess I'll have to go, where I'm going to get my other vegan supplements. Because that was the source for a lot of my vegan insights. So anyway, I think Black people, our very concept and understanding of violence, well, I think everybody's concept is confused, but since our audience is mostly Black folks, we might as well just talk to them and our particular confusion about violence, retribution, and revolution. So, but I see that I put in the on the thumbnail terrorism. And let's first talk about violence as terrorism, because for a long time, Noam Chomsky talks about this in detail. I can't name one of his books. I mean, Noam Chomsky wrote too many goddamn books, and I read too many of his goddamn books. And so when I want to quote him, I might quote one of the wrong books. We got a bunch of nerds in the chat. Well, actually, that was on Power. So I hate being corrected. My wife will testify to that. So I'm not going to say which book it is, but there's one chapter in one of his books where he talks about the U.S. and Israeli government wanted to create a formal definition of terrorism. And they kept amending and changing the formal definition of terrorism. What was that? Why did it go up? Hold on. You hear that? Oh, wait. Oh, okay. I fixed it. Sorry about that. They were having trouble defining what terrorism was because because before you can make a law or a policy about a behavior or a phenomenon or a condition, you have to define it in legal terms. Like if you ever ran into a Hebrew Israelite, they love that goddamn law dictionary. But definition and defining terms, like if you've ever been charged with a crime, which I'm sure you haven't, but as a person who's been charged with the crime and been in the legal process, now I ain't got no stripes. I've never done no time. I've always weaseled my way out of everything. But lawyers focus very much on definition, or what they call the letter of the law versus the color of the law, what the law states literally versus what it intends to do. So anyway, all that set aside, when they wanted to create or start to build this whole anti-terrorism task force, anti-terrorism policies, and started defining states as rogue state and terrorist states and things of that nature, when they were trying to define what terrorism was, whenever they would lay it out, they would look at the definition and they'd be like, oh shit, that applies to the U.S. military. That applies to the CIA. That applies to the local, Chicago Police Department or the Mississippi PD. So every time they defined specifically in legal terms, and especially in terms of international law, they kept struggling to create a definition of terrorism that would include the Palestinians, the PLO at the time. Hamas wasn't really a factor in that time. That would include rogue nations, that would include the communists, that would include Castro, that would include Che Guevara. How do I define Che Guevara's behavior as terrorism while taking the Army Rangers and the Army Special Forces and their violence will not fall under that definition? So that's why even though many of us in the common, we like, oh, he's a terrorist, or that's terrorism, or we looked at the media and we hear them denounce terrorism or denounce a terrorist, we always assume, everybody assumes they know what terrorism means and what a terrorist is. But I don't think most people really comprehend what will get you classified as a terrorist in terms of the legal definition, in terms of the law, the word of the law versus the color of the law versus common sense or informal understanding of terrorist and terrorism.
Yeah. I'm letting you build it out, bro.
Oh, so and so they found a word that they really liked, that they injected into terrorism. So now when you look up the definition of terrorism, most people will say, oh, terrorism is violence for political violence or violence directed at civilians for a political aim, right? But they injected this word that wasn't really in the old definition called the unlawful use of violence. So terrorism is not bombing people, not killing civilians, not intimidating. Terrorism is the unlawful engagement of those things. So if you are lawful, and then you have to ask yourself, who determines who and what is lawful and unlawful? Because you could say, bro, Diallo went out and harmed this family, went out and burned down this whole community, burned a bunch of houses to the ground and assaulted and murdered all these people. And depending on the circumstances, I could be a national hero and people saying, thank you for your service as I walk through the airport and I get to board my plane before everybody else. Or I can spend the rest of my life in a prison and be called a terrorist. And because terrorism is literally just the unlawful and get people unlawfully engaging in everything that governments, military, police forces, multinational corporations, private military forces, private security firms, all of these entities engage in power that are lawful, because law is made by the government, and we understand government is pretty much controlled in this epoch of political history, is controlled by multinational corporations. We can distill terrorism down to one thing, and that's basically anybody acting out of the interest and permission of the state or multinational corporations. So if you engage in violence that is unlawful, but lawful violence, and now we're to the point where militaries, government militaries, and multinational corporations engage in all of the terrorism. And by definition, we can't call it terrorism, even though it's identical and at a more intensive scale of the people we are allowed to call legally terrorists. And we have accepted this. We weren't consulted as citizens. We weren't allowed to vote on it. This was not a democratic decision. And so it annoys me to hear people, and pretty much now, at this juncture, we as people, whether or not someone is called a terrorist as a citizen or as a person who has a justice minded, to me, we should be indifferent to the title at this point. Because literally, Nat Turner is legally defined as a terrorist. Just like, seriously though, it's not funny. Harriet Tubman would be defined legally as a thief. She stole herself, and then she went and stole herself away, and then she went and stole a bunch of other property.
Yeah, Born Center put in the chat, chattel slavery was law.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely where my mind immediately went. Like slavery was legal. Domestic violence was legal, right? Like it was legal to hit your wife. Like that was not a violation of any law. So the law doesn't mean anything. And I think that's one of those things, to pivot just slightly, right? When people talk about, I use your term ball chasers and rapists and these other evil folks, will quickly say, well, they were found not guilty. But that doesn't mean anything to me. Like I have to use my own mind and come up with what I believe is right and wrong. And then that's the standard, right? Like not what power says is the standard. Cause we can't, no, that's not it. So the one question I have, to your definition, when you say it's unlawful use of violence, and then power upholds the law, like that's how we get into slavery was legal and things like that. What, because you're big on semantics, what is a term that we could use to kind of capture the idea that one person's terrorist is another person's hero? Like Pancho Villa, Nat Turner, what's boy name that let Custard have it? Whoever the boy was from the Cheyennes that gave Custard that work. What do we get to build or define in a way that we can then begin to use to kind of highlight that contradiction? What's some language that we could use?
Well, I think I still go with the common terms. To me, it's leftist violence or right-wing violence, liberatory violence versus repressive violence, decolonial violence versus colonial violence, anti-imperial violence. So whenever someone commits an act of violence, you have to ask, it's really defined, again, a term I really don't have the right to use, but I just think it's such a wonderful term that I can't think of a better way to say it. Sin is not what you do, but the spirit in which you do it. So that's how I define whether or not I can sanction or support violence. Well, there's that scale. Is it revolutionary violence or reactionary violence? But another thing I say is, how is the violence directed? Because there's only 3 types of violence. I mean, well, if you read Down Risings, he has much more complex. I think I have that book. I took it back downstairs. But there's a comprehensive book about violence in all its manifestation called Down Risings. But I don't want to get into that. There's basically 3 types of violence, or any violence that you engage with, or you observe, or you're subjected to, or you impose on somebody can fall into 3 categories. And that's descending violence, lateral violence, or ascending violence. And descending violence is when you are engaged or committing violence to someone who's lower than you on the hierarchy. And that's not just the economic, but the social, political, racial, theological hierarchy. When you commit violence against someone who is lower than you on the hierarchy, that is called descending violence. And that is the most common, not only is it the most common form of violence, it is the most socially acceptable form of violence. It is the form of violence that we celebrate. It's the form of violence that most often falls under the category of lawful, and it is the form of violence that goes unreported by and large. Then you have lateral violence. That's when people on the same level of the hierarchy engage in violence against each other. And the final form of violence, and I think that is the only just form of violence, that in terms of advancing the interest of the people, is ascending violence. And that's when someone lower, a group or an individual lower on the hierarchy, commits violence against those higher on the hierarchy. And that is the violence that only that form of violence you'll find is defined as terrorism. Only that form of violence. No other form of violence, lateral violence or descending violence, is defined as terrorism. In fact, the people that come to mind when we most often hear terrorism due to our Western propaganda and our own indoctrination, when you think violence, you think Muslim, Middle Eastern. When you think terrorism, Muslim, Middle Eastern violence. But the vast majority of the victims of Islamic terrorism are other Muslims. But you will find that the so-called Islam, the only time the West will highlight that violence is when it serves their interest. And in fact, when the Mujahideen or Islamic terrorists, when their primary and sole targets were other Muslims, they were defined as heroes by the West. Ronald Reagan invited the Mujahideen. See, they just renamed. That's what they keep renaming them. The Mujahideen, ISIS. What was it before? Al Qaeda. They just rename all these groups that pretty much are the same people with the same funding, the same basic ideology. But back in that day, before they went rogue, or as Chalmers Johnson would say, Chalmers Johnson would call them call it blowback.
They were called heroes. Your boy in Chicago had on the front page, when chickens come home to roost. I'll never forget that.
Who said that?
Your boy.
Oh, Marcus Klein.
No, your boy.
Who?
He was on the front of the Final Call. Chi-Town, your boy.
Okay. Yeah, I see you threw me for a loop. Got jokes. So anyway, in terms of violence, we understand that the United States is understood by most of the people outside of the United States as being the Jeremiah Wright. Okay, where he at? Is he still? Where is he? Has he gone on to glory? What's he? I ain't heard his name. His name used to ring out. No, he's still with us. I guess. Man, he was the Jeremiah Wright. Man, he was right about some things, wrong about others. But anyway, so back to violence. So anyway, we understand that ascending violence is the violence that is defined as terrorism or terroristic. And because U.S. citizens specifically, but the masses of people don't really have any type of class consciousness, it has essentially been obliterated, especially in the West. When our oppressors, when our elites say that they're under attack, they're able to go and say we're under attack. And we say, oh, we're under attack. But like Dead Prez said, they wasn't aiming at us. They're not coming for us. Oops. Let's see.
Yeah, like to just kind of jump in at this point, that's where it gets really interesting. And I appreciate the growth that you and Jared have had, you know, and just kind of reframing some of the things that I've thought and read. But, you know, this idea that we still see ourselves, you know, as like a part of America, like our Americanness comes up when America wants us to be rallying with them. But, you know, we are quickly put down and put to the side when that doesn't when we are not needed um in those rooms and in those meetings, right? Like, excuse me, we don't ever really think about beyond that. Yeah. And then when you talk about our class consciousness, black celebrity can remember when Puff Daddy was telling us that he wanted to buy a football team and how, you know, it was about us and what we needed to do, and this was for the culture, whatever that means, and you know, like kind of throwing and stacking all of those terms together to get black folk to kind of support him in his particular ownership thing. But when his artists were talking, like it wasn't nothing collective about the way that he was kind of taking, you know, all of their work, you know what I'm saying? Like there was nothing collective about the structure of that, you know, and I just often think about how, you know, even, you know, people can say what they want, but even with Deion Sanders, right? Like, man,
Deion Savior.
Man, you would have thought Deion Sanders was, you know,
Colonel Sanders.
You know what I'm saying? Like, boy, like
you would think he had came up with
man. Look, that boy was Thomas and Carr and Fred Hampton and like anybody else you like any other black person that you would put on a t-shirt. He was all enrolled into one. And the way that when
why you speaking past tense?
Oh, well, you know, still is. Right? You like folks just, you know, like look at what Deion doing for us. Us. So, you know, I always think about that, how, you know, and it's something that you said on one of the Earn Your Liberations. You were like, we believe in trickle down economics when the black faces are at the top of it. You know, like Tyler Perry gonna get this, and then he gonna pay us fairly, right? And we've yet to see those things come to fruition.
Oh, we see the opposite. Tyler Perry is a union buster.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Like he ain't paying us fairly. Like, like he
better off you go.
And then when he doesn't do it is, well, he can't do it yet because the white folks stopping him. Well, hold on, whoa. Like, you know, is it Uchi Wally? Is it one Mike? Like, I just think it's one of those things that like we just really want to pick and choose the lie.
Yeah.
And I think it's like some class illusion in there, but it's also just like I just don't quite understand it. You know what I'm saying? Like just in like a real, like just from a purely nuts and bolts position, right? Like I don't know how at any point individual success is tied to collective uplift or achievement. I've just never seen a compelling argument for that. And we just keep having these conversations around this one imaginary leader that allows us to be so easily swayed in most of these conversations, even looking at like, well, they killing children. Well, y'all wasn't this mad when that Israeli gunship shot them boys up on the beach.
Listen, there was a child who was run over by a U.S. citizen who was literally run over by an Israeli tank. And this is the thing about white privilege. I have to, you know, I always tell black folks, keep running around, stop. Y'all pushing that white privilege myth. You're going to get your white friends killed. because there were some young Americans who were also under the illusion that white privilege was a real thing. And there were some young white kids who went over to be human shields to stop the demolition of Palestinian homes. And so she's standing there, both arms in the air, and this big John Deere tractor ran her over and saw her intestines caught up in the tractor threads. And she was a U.S. citizen, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, Christian white girl. So, and that was swept under the rug by the U.S. government, because her white privilege is not white privilege, it's right privilege. Right-wing, reactionary, fascist, and racist white people can get away with shit that liberal, progressive, socialist white folks can't get away with. Man, I guess let me just go ahead and it's years ago, but I remember that, like, you know. Let me see, what's that? This was a while ago. I'll pull her name up. I just can't remember her name. And all the Israeli citizen. Sorry, hold on, give me one more second. Man, it was a while ago. Anyway, on violence, let's talk about for violence, because do you take the position that violence is wrong and violence is never the answer?
No. Jesus said, if a man have not a sword, let him sell his garment and buy one.
Really? That's curious, because I mean, so many black people, especially, as Martin Luther King famously said, he got nonviolence from Jesus Christ, and he got the tactics and strategies of the what do you say? He got the spiritual rationale from Jesus, and he got the tactics and strategies of nonviolence from Gandhi.
No, Jesus was with the shits, bro. Like, as I understood. And I think no, that ain't. And you know what's really interesting is like, being a legit Southerner, one of the things that kind of pops up a lot is you know, I can wole and we will shoot back. I was always told, like, taught even as a child, like, you stay away from over there. Right? But it wasn't like out of fear. It was like, because you gonna respond in the way that we expect you to respond, and then you need to be prepared to deal with all of that. You know, like, no, I'm not. I think in a lot of instances we can even, you know, like the idea of turn the other cheek, I think was in response to using your language, descendant violence. You know, like, you don't punch down, you attacking what the issue is. And we not, I ain't never been taught, you know what I'm saying? You know.
All right. Yeah, well, he said Christ furnished the spirit and motivation, while Gandhi furnished the method for nonviolence.
You know, and you know, I also think it's just strange, even with that, right? Like, I wish King was alive so that I could see him as an old man, because I really wonder, like, what that would be like.
He'd be like Dick Gregory. Did you see Dick Gregory toward the end? We know, we ain't got to guess.
Hey,
Dick Gregory was out there marching right alongside Dr. King. Dick Gregory wasn't just marching, he was fasting and marching. You know, Dr. King was eating. He get to that. He be,
Man,
you ain't no brother going to Alabama back then. Soul Food King would eat in March. Dick Gregory would fast in March. So,
yeah.
we already know what an age civil rights icon would do. Dick Gregory, he beat you like Dick Gregory, motherfucker. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it.
Hey, man, boy, look, just some of the stories that you would hear from folks that was just kind of around in different ways. You should be like, say what now?
Hey, let's say, yeah, I love Dick Gregory, man. I went to see him at the Billy House. I seen him live a few times, but I saw him. He had went off. The IRS and the feds came after him hard. Took his house, just came after him, tried to bury him, and so he went on basically on hiatus and was like over a decade of no shows, no public talks. And his first public appearance was, I believe, was 1992 or 93 at the Billie Holiday Theater in Brooklyn. And I went there and I gave my ticket. I went by myself because I'd be like, let's go see Dick. When people used to say Dick Gregory, they used to talk about like diet drinks and shit.
Yeah.
I didn't know that Dick Gregory. Because I grew up reading like his biography, Nigger. I read Nigger and I Dick Gregory's political primer. So I always knew Dick Gregory as like a civil rights activist and a writer. But Dick Gregory's not a very unique name. So people be like, yeah, give me that Dick Gregory. I was unaware. I never tied those two together.
That's
because I'm like, that can't be the political dude. And so I went to see him and he came out on stage passing out ripe bananas and fruit to the audience.
Like, you got to make you a smoothie. You can't be eating. You can't be eating every day.
And he was passing out. Yeah, that was wonderful. But yeah, I got so many fond memories. And what was really funny about Dick Gregory was whenever white folks would pay to fly him out somewhere, he would always go to like the little juke joints and the churches and do free shows off the back of the white money the white folks put up. And he'd always come in there and be mad because it's like, stop telling these white folks. I've been seeing flyers and stuff out here. These white folks that flew me out for 2 days and I told them to pay for 5. Here I am. And he used to come to all like the backwoods area, man. And he'd be so mad when black folks like, just do word of mouth because I'm here. Y'all didn't pay to fly me out. Y'all ain't paying for my food, my hotel room. And he'd do all these. Del Jones used to do that too. And do all these free shows around the hood, and or like $2, $3, $5 shows around the hood after charging like $45 to give a lecture at the local university or some shit.
Yeah, I mean, Dick Gregory was crazy about that. Like when I would like get a gig at a school or something like that, you know what I'm saying? I was on the same thing. Like, who out here getting to it? Like, and I thought until this conversation right now, I thought that was like me thinking like that. So to know that like that's what we've been on, because my idea was from the segregated the show. So you would do one show for the white folks, and then you would do another set at the black owned spot. So I was out in-house, but I don't know, man. Like I would
love that in the 2000s. He was doing that in the 90s.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, yeah,
he was doing that well after Jim Crow. He was just,
But I'm just the reason I brought up King was like to think about what really was the aim. Like, I just always have wondered, like when you look at just the sheer amount of violence, of course, they get through it and they don't think it's worth it because of what it costs. But ultimately, I'm just thinking to myself, like, how do we find ways to keep engaging folks? Because at the times that we're living in, especially now, like there isn't anything else that you can do, because like any argument that we will make politically or otherwise, right? Even this conversation is only so far it's gonna get, and the people that are participating in the conversation or are going to have to carry it out into their spheres of influence, right? Like that's the only way it's gonna grow because the algorithms are not gonna allow it to take root and really move. And thinking about our lived experience, our lived political response, how how do we grow it? How do we move it? Like what does it mean and where does it come from? What does it mean and how do we move it forward? Because the dominant culture's conversation seems to be the only one that we can have.
Yeah, I think you said the key word, culture. And the thing about culture, I think we get confused about culture. We think it's something that, you know, um just occurs organically or naturally. But culture is deliberately constructed and sustained. And so the problem with the culture is that we need revolutionary culture. And because the systemic oppression and the oppressors understood they could not they could not suppress or eliminate the threat of revolution. They just said we'll warp it, we'll contaminate it. You know, a lot of times if they can't cut off supply, they'll contaminate it, the source of life. I mean, that happens literally and figuratively. That's not just a metaphor, because I mean, in many of its attempts in Cuba, the United States was known for poisoning and destroying livestock and crops in Cuba. So they distort the concept of revolution, and African people's culture has been contaminated. And we really thought that integration would just mean, and equality would mean equal access, equal opportunity, and full recognition of our rights as citizens. We didn't look at the flip side of that, where I always say, which is rather frightening to me to conclude, being understanding how much life, blood we've invested in equality, that um, securing equality with your oppressor makes you equal to your oppressor. And it is really because so many of these civil rights icons, it really is kind of frightening to me that they didn't really, nobody seemed to really understood or really grasp what it meant for Black equality in America. And we got equality, and we're getting all of the predictable problems that will come with equality. And for the last half century, we've pretty much asserted that the solution for the problems that have been born out of securing equality with whites is more equality. So it is a culture. We do need a revolution. And there are a lot of people who think that revolution is a gun, revolution is rage and outrage. And I say to people all the time, revolution is an intellectual endeavor. They didn't call it the counter violence program. They didn't call it the counter militant program. They didn't call it the counter Black power program. They called it the counter intelligence program, because they knew that component of the struggle was the most threatening struggle. I say this all the time, and I'm going to say it one more time before I say it another time. Malcolm X went around this country for almost a decade calling the white man a devil. Malcolm X tells in great detail, going to the Jim Crow South, not just to the South, but to the Jim Crow South, to the racist North, in parts of Detroit, Boston. He went into some of the from California to the east to west Ivy League schools, saying the white man is a Caucasus Mountain cave dwelling devil, a grafted man who was grafted from the pig and the dog and the rat. But we see that the counterintelligence program really deemed him a serious threat, not because when he said take up a gun, But when he said, listen, this is an international struggle, it's a Pan-African struggle. I will no longer be a part of excluding other black people from joining the struggle because they don't have the same religion as me or don't bow to the same God as me, leave religion in the closet. When Malcolm X started to turn his brilliance away from cultish rhetoric towards scholarly analysis and Pan-African organization as opposed to cultish or exclusive organization, that's when they were like, yo, we have to greenlight this man. It's the same thing with Dr. King. So it is, they fear more than anything else. There are more guns in the black community than any other time in history. You ever heard of this character named Black Rambo? For some reason, he keeps popping up in my recommendations. And this man is shooting comic book guns. This man is shooting video game guns. Do you think any government agency, any white institution in any way fears Black Rambo? You know, I mean, Dr. Ball sitting at his little desk typing away and developing his analysis is more of a threat to capitalism than 1,000 Black Rambos. So it's kind of say, you said the word culture. We have to radicalize our culture. And the only way we can radicalize our culture is if we start to, our intellects and our scholars start to be valued, supported, and listened to. So it is our culture. But I have another, because I'm glad that you said that violence is not wrong, inherently wrong. Can we now start to discuss when is violence justified?
Yeah, let's get to it. Yeah, let's get to it. I got a couple things that I think, but let's get to it. I want you to set it up.
Well, me, I am, I have to say, I am a tree hugging vegan, nonviolent. I am a practitioner and a full supporter of nonviolence. I'm anti-violence. But I think what people don't understand is that nonviolence is essentially cannot be one-sided. As Malcolm X said, if you and I were face to face and I smacked you across the face and you didn't strike me back, that wasn't a nonviolent interaction. For some reason, we've been thinking that nonviolence can be practiced by one side. If I beat my wife and she never strikes me back, would anybody ever say, well, that's a nonviolent relationship? So the very concept, and I do accept nonviolence, but nonviolence cannot be determined, dictated, or imposed by the victim, the target, the oppressed. Nonviolence can only be determined and established by those who are inflicting or acting upon others. Violence, the presence or absence of violence, and the form that violence takes is dictated by the oppressor, whether that is a capitalist, imperialist, colonial, domestic violence. You'll look at guerrilla warfare or the tactics and strategies used by those from the Iraqi insurgents to the FMLN guerrillas to the burning bed housewife. I don't know if you're familiar with the burning bed. You might be too young. But the burning bed, the tactics that a person uses to free themselves is not dictated by the person who's seeking freedom. If I was oppressing a person and the person says, I won't stand for this oppression, they could just get up and walk away from me. So, but if I start to pursue them, then I've pretty much forced them to run, And if I start to use violence, then I'm forcing them to react to violence. So the violence that occurs in a situation of oppressor and oppressed, colonized, colonizer, enslaver, enslaved capitalist worker, the violence that is used is always dictated. The form that violence takes, or the form that resistance takes, is never the choice of those who are oppressed. It is the choice of the oppressor. If Palestine was allowed to have its own government and military, then its resistance would be very different than it is now. But because Israel has denied Palestine access to conventional weapons, access to self-governance, access to its territory, access to anything that can be defined as a state for the purpose of forming a military, their violence has no other route but to take the form of asymmetrical guerrilla warfare and guerrilla tactics. And if you read any book on guerrilla warfare, and from Che Guevara to Mao to Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, once the colonized, the oppressed are able to secure territory, secure self-governance, secure sovereignty, secure resources, then they can engage in the warfare we all like to watch movies about. Two standing armies across the battlefield, gallant and honor and all this bullshit. But so the actions that are taken by Nat Turner, taken by the Intifada, the PLO or Hamas, the actions taken by any individual or group that is fighting genocidal oppression, where whoever is harmed in that conflict, the fault lies solely at the provocateur, the one who provoked the conflict, not the one who is responding to the conflict.
Yeah, you have a well, you don't, because that's not the way you see it, but I see all human beings as having a God-given right to existence. Once you start trying to put walls around my right to exist, well, I have a God-given right to defend myself. So I don't, it's hard for me at any point to recognize. I don't know if violence is the answer or if it isn't the answer. What I am certain of is that if you got to consider what I'm going to do, that's going to slow you down and coming over here to do something. And I just think it's hard for me to wrap my brain around how a person doesn't really recognize that, right? Like, I have a right to whatever it is that I think. The minute that I leave my house trying to convince you to do something else, you have a right to be like, hey man, gone. Like, and somebody put in the chat that violence as a first step. Like, I don't know of any instance where violence, you second person plural, may attempt to stop me without using violence in the form of a gun, violence in the form of a stick, right? But the minute that you build a dam that stop this river from flowing to my farm, what's that if that ain't violent? Like I don't quite understand that, like, you knew that I had a farm out here when you built this dam that stopped the water from flowing to me.
Well, I think you touched on something that's very important, because I had a professor who's a very prominent community psychologist who's done a lot of good things. This is one individual that I admire greatly and that has done really, really, good things within his profession. But he asserted to me that he was a pacifist. And I think there's a difference, because a lot of people who believe they're nonviolence, they're not nonviolence, they're non-self-defense. I will employ violence extremely aggressively in defense of myself and others. I, as a socialist, I really don't accept violence in defense of property under a capitalist system. I think to employ to impose violence in defense of descending violence in defense of property. I think, but that's discussion. But he was nonviolent, and I explained to him how he could truly engage in nonviolence. Because I mean, as a pacifist, because I said everything that makes your life livable is drenched in blood. So I said the clothing on your back, I said if we looked at the labels on your clothes, we'd see places like Haiti, Bangladesh, China, of course, Indonesia, Vietnam. So every article of clothing that you're wearing, your watch, your jewelry, it's drenched in blood. I said, of course, the money in your pocket, whether it's cash or plastic, it's drenched in blood and a byproduct of blood. I said the soil you stand on, the soil your home is on, the soil you walk on is drenched in blood. I said the car you drive is fuel. The fuel in that car is drenched in blood. I said there is literally, especially a white man living in the United States, an upper middle class white male professional. I said you cannot take the that's like me standing and having 15 kids and saying I'm sterile. You know, those two things don't align. And so I said the only way for you to be is to strip yourself naked, relinquish everything you own, and on top of that, you have to levitate above the soil, because the moment you touch foot on the U.S. soil, you're again profiting and perpetuating violence. And so, again, I said what I said to him, and then when I went to talk to students, because this reality to a degree applies to many of us in the West, is the only way to justifiably benefit from all this blood and suffering, from the ancestors to the sweatshop workers and the coltan miners, the artisanal miners as they're calling them now, is to understand the debt that we owe in the West for all that blood, for all that sacrifice. And we could either stand against it, denounce it, and organize against it, or we can secure the bag and perpetuate it. But there is no neutral position. And I think there's this term that I've come up with called sterilizing distance. And what I told this individual is that the only difference between you as a pacifist, upper middle class white male and a young man robbing people in the street or selling drugs, doing whatever unlawful thing you could imagine for money, is that certain people, everybody in this world has a certain distance between themselves and the violence that sustains their lives. And I call that a sterilizing distance. So if I directly go out and harm people to sustain my life, then I don't have any distance between myself and the violence that sustain me. But if I'm like a gang boss and I give other people the orders to go out and commit violence for my wealth, then that's one step away. If I'm a CEO, or if I'm a ball chaser with $1 million sneaker deal, then the violence that allows Jordan to be a millionaire, he's a million miles away from the violence that made him a billionaire. So what people who claim they're non-violent or they're not violent or they don't do violence or I don't commit crimes, what they have is a sterilizing distance. The more distance you have, physical and economic distance you have, you know, it's like the distance between going to Kentucky Fried Chicken to buy your chicken versus going out to the barnyard to break the neck of the chicken, rip out its guts, pull out its feathers, or versus having somebody serve that up for you. And it's really weird when I see people who eat animals talk about, oh, I hate to see animals. They can't stand the sight of blood. They can't stand the sight of intestines and internal organs. They can't stand the smell. They can't stand the sound of the screeching of the animals. That's sterilizing distance between the violence that is sustained you. And I always hear where people, I won't get into that. I'm not going to get on the vegan soapbox. I think I kind of made my point. So generally, when you engage with somebody that claims that they don't, I'm not into violence, I don't break the law. The only reason you don't have to break the law is other people who break the law on your behalf. And you have a sterilizing distance between yourself and the crimes that allow you to live the lifestyle you live.
Yeah, that's it, bro. I mean, I killed the chicken before. You know?
Shame on you.
Yeah, did that.
Shame on you.
Did it.
What's the chicken do to you?
I ate it too. I killed it. Shout out to my brother. You know, like, yeah, I love it. I love the term. Like, I think, you know, like, and there you go. Gene Lamont is talking that talk too. You know, violence under capitalism is a social production of safety for the rich. Right? Like, like, you know, the idea of sterilizing distance, right? Like, I think that's one of the things that, you know, earlier when I was like, yo, like, what's some language? I think that's it right there, right? Like, because it is very easy to talk about what people ought to be doing when you don't have to deal with the doing of it. You know, one of the things, like, just a little slight pivot that I often talk about with people that are abolitionists is, well, when the consequences have to be doled out, who doles those consequences out?
Well, you kind of touched on that before. I wanted, because you talked about law is imposed by power.
Mm-hmm.
But as a, you know, that's not, I understand that you're right about that. So I'm not saying you're wrong about that. But that's not how it's supposed to be. Remember when Dr. King said he wants America to live up to the content of its creed? So, you know, Dr. King indicted white folks. Dr. King basically said, I'm not telling you to do what I said do. I'm not trying to dictate to you or control you or tell you to do anything. I want you to do what you said you were going to do. That's what it means to live up to the content of your creed. You have a creed. And so I have a lot of opinions about what you should and shouldn't do, like killing and eating chickens. And if I did that, I would be wrong. I would be a hypocrite. But not for you, because that's not your value system. That's not your ideology. That's not your creed. So you eating a chicken is not a violation of your creed. Me eating one would be an absolute violation of my creed, because I am a vegan and I've been running around, you know, the hood for 30 years, harassing people to go vegan. So anyway, violent law, the source of legitimacy for the law is consent of the governed. That's what it's supposed to be. There is not supposed to be any laws that have not been legislated by the representatives of the people. And the people give consent to the representatives, who then go and represent. So this is a representative democracy. So the source of power in this government and state, in any type of official institution, is consent.
Right.
Now, we as citizens have allowed it to devolve to power, to gun, to the capacity and will to kill and incarcerate us. You know, and it's weird that so many people acquiesce to this, that we acquiesce to that every time there is any type of, even coming out of official sources and think tanks, they say that the United States is no longer democratic. It is an oligarchy. And so many people voluntarily disenfranchise themselves, say, I don't vote. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't do anything, which is demonstrably untrue. And so there's a lot of, I would say there's a lot of complacency. People have traded, because, I mean, again, I don't know. Let me stop being. When I was in school, there was a lot of rhetoric and instruction around civic duty and what it meant to be a citizen. And you would have to fulfill your civic duty. You almost never hear that. Now the tone is get yours, do for self, get the bag, secure the bag. And the whole concept of being a public citizen or a public person, you know, and people, you don't even brag about, because it was a time where people would brag about their communities. And if you meet somebody from another neighborhood, they'd be like, my community. And the only people that do that shit now are gangbangers. Now people will tell you about how nice their house is with no thought to how nice their community is.
I think
I know people that live in my neighborhood that have not physically left the within a 2-block radius, have not left the 2-block radius unless they're in a car. That don't even walk their neighborhoods.
I think one of those things that's just so jarring to me is that when you talk to people in those communities, I work with a lot of people that do things in schools, and the people that are in those schools will tell you how terrible the people in that school are, as if they don't go to that school too. It is always jarring for me when people that live in communities are just so divorced from the value of their community, right? Like, their neighbors aren't good people. Their children can't play with these bad kids in their neighborhood. The school sucks. Like, it's nothing good in this community. And you stay here. I'm very confused.
Well, it used to be, I think that's consumerism. That's consumerism. You know, again, there was a time where your family name and your family reputation was your currency. People would do business with you, trade with you, lend you shit, or even be willing to be seen with you in public, or allow their children to intermarry with your children based on your family name. And even if your family name was mud, you could redeem yourself. Now it's about your personal income. Like a woman, there was this article a few years ago that went viral where this woman said she wouldn't date a man with less than a 780 credit score. As if a murderer, as if an immoral predator couldn't have a high credit score. And you know, you used to talk about people according to their family name, like, oh, that he's a Johnson, you know, and he's a Johnson. And no, he don't here. Oh, here come one of them Smiths is coming up. One of them Smiths is coming. Oh, don't talk. You know how the Smiths are. They go tell everybody business. Or you got a problem, you need to go talk. Okay, go talk to the Richardsons. Where you would be identified according to your family. You know, when I was coming up, I had a best friend growing up, and he was with the Williams. And the Williams was known to have hands. You know, and there was Williams that I know couldn't fight, but nobody messed with him. Oh, don't mess with that's one of the Williamses. They don't play. And now that is, and I hate to go there because I know our people don't like this, but that's literally a textbook case of Marxist theory of alienation. The more you get embedded into capitalism, the capitalist framework, the capitalist mentality, the capitalist value system, capitalist materialism, consumerism, the more alienated, the more of a unit of production. You're no longer a person. You're a unit of production. You're not valued as a person. You're valued on your output and what you bring in. You know, and so we go from love don't cost a thing being kind of like the love songs and the value system, love don't cost a thing, to broke boys don't get no pussy. You know, I know that's right. You know, so that is the theory, and I say all the time, it's a trap. You know, there was talk. Remember, people always talk about the achievement gap and the income gap. I talk about the achievement trap and the achievement and income trap, because what you got to do to get there. What you got to do to get there. So, yeah, I think again, we got more equality than we know, because we thought when we were segregated, living in them shanties, that white folks was living good. And we think, oh, we're living bad. You know, we got equality, we got integration, we done desegregated the lunch counter, desegregated the schools, desegregated everything, and we're still fucked up. We're still miserable. We must not have desegregated enough. Let's diversity in, let's get more diversity, inclusion. But the thing is, even when at the height of Jim Crow, when white folks had all the land, all the resources, and all the power, they were miserable. And we look at Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire on TV and be like, wow, white folks living good. Let's get equal to that shit. So until we pivot away from integration, inclusion, diversity, and pivot towards liberation, we're going to see more of this alienation in more and more horrendous ways within our culture and our community. I think we haven't even got to retribution. So but just to wrap up violence, we accept that violence is not inherently good or bad. And I think violence, what makes violence justified is, again, the objectives. And I think that violence is always the fault of the one who imposes the injustice, not the one reacting to the injustice. And anybody both siding, you can't both sides genocide. So anybody's out here talking about, well, the Palestinians carry no fault. These Negroes out here thinking they high and mighty. I denounce Hamas. Hamas is a product of Zionism. All of the blame for what's going on in that particular conflict rests at the feet of the Zionist genocidal settler colonial state. And that includes the deaths on both sides. Only rests with one side. And if you don't like it, you can decolonize. The one step, the appropriate thing to do is decolonize. And that two-state solution is bullshit. There shouldn't be a two-state solution. That's only one state. Number one. Number two, if you don't want to decolonize, then equip the freedom fighters, or equip the anti-colonial forces with conventional weapons and conventional resources. And then you could see a proper war. If you don't like guerrilla, asymmetrical warfare, guerrilla tactics, if that upsets you so much, they only have to do that because they have no access to conventional weapons. So if you ain't going to stop the war, and not going to properly fund the war, please shut the blood clot up about the tactics that the oppressed use. And I think violence should be determined by the goal, or driven by the agenda and the goal. And ascending violence is always justified. Lateral violence is questionable, and descending violence is never acceptable.
Okay.
So retribution and revolution. Well, let's just jump to revolution so we can open up for some discussion.
Yeah. One of the things that you said triggered a question. You know, I'm putting them in our chat. So I'm just keeping up with them over there. So I'm not putting the names of the folks over there. But you know,
Oh,
Here we go.
and can I say one more thing? I had a discussion with a Palestinian scholar,
Mm.
and I got 4 gallons of Palestinian. That's probably where my bias come from. The Palestinians have bought my support. I'm just going full disclosure here. I got 4 gallons of the best tasting olive oil, better than anything coming out of Italy
Hold
I've
on, whoa,
ever
whoa, whoa,
had
whoa.
from
How
the
many gallons you got?
Palestinian. Oh, well, it was 4 gallons when we got it.
How many you got now?
I don't know. I don't measure it. You should see my wife and I. It's this huge drum, and
I'm
my
just
wife
saying.
goes
So,
to
like,
the
I need
bottle
some of
and we
that
use
though.
the funnel, and I have to use all my
I need some of that.
manly muscles to pour it.
Yeah. I need some of that.
Come
Though.
through. Come to Chicago. You have all the wonderful Palestinian olive oil you could want, and you're gonna have to murder chickens needlessly. Come through. You down there enjoying all that sun times. Come get some of these cold, dreary, sunless days we got up north. Come, it's almost time. Come dredge through this ankle deep snow and sludge we about to get up here. Fix your face. But anyway, like I said, full disclosure, the Zionists ain't gave me shit. So maybe I'm not as good a man as I think I am. The Zionists ain't gave me shit. My Palestinian allies have given me 4 gallons of from their own um, olive grove, and I'm going through it. And now everybody in this house all of a sudden got to put olive oil on everything. God, I hate any yeah, full disclosure. But man, it's some of the best olive oil I ever had. You know, and again, I know I'm a coffee snob and an olive oil slob. Other than that, I'm a man of the people. I am of the masses. It's only 2 things I want to retain for myself after the revolution, and that's my oat milk lattes and my Palestinian olive grove oil. Other than that, I will live as the rest, the common socialist commune, and I will seek nothing more for myself than my fellow man has. I promise, more equal than others. Anyway, revolution. Did I interrupt you? Okay, revolution. It's my position that revolution is an intellectual endeavor. And the reality is, if we study revolutions in detail, the problem with the research and study and comprehensions of revolutions and uprisings, we think that revolution is is um is a violent process, inherently or intrinsically a violent process. But what is more true is that counter revolution is violent. Revolution generally is not a violent process. It's most of the violence that we see, and I don't care, like I said, if it's the Bolshevik revolution, if it's the anti-apartheid revolution, whether it is the American so-called American Revolution, which wasn't really a revolution, but people. Uh, the long story short, what we tend to find is when there is enough momentum amongst the masses of the people, you know, revolutionary transformation is pretty much arrived at through an intellectual, cultural, peaceful means. If you look at a lot of revolutionary heroes that we know, we see them with the guns. We see even Che Guevara. He was a scholar. He was a man of letters. He was a trained physician. You know, so same thing with Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah used to be hanging out in Harlem hang suites, debating with Dr. Clark. In a cipher, beatboxing and shit. So we'll see that most of our revolutions, they generally say, listen, this is going to fundamentally change. This relationship, this way of structuring society, these hierarchies are unacceptable. And we're going to change. And you'll see a lot like labor unions. The workers would say that's enough. We're sick of being exploited. So we're going to walk off the job. or we're going to put down, we're going to just sit down strikes and wildcat strikes. The slaves would just be like, put down the hoe, put down the sickle. Just, I'm done. I'm not doing this. I don't cooperate. And those trying to continue to impose the unjust system, that's where the violence comes. But then the revolutionaries get blamed from the violence when it's truly the violence was provoked and started and expanded by the counter-revolutionaries. And it's so unfortunate. We got reactionaries like Dr. Umar Johnson, who claim to be Pan-Africans, who claim to be revolutionaries. We have so many reactionaries who have the rhetoric, who have the names. They keep putting our ancestors' name in their mouth. Marcus Garvey, Frederick Douglass, and they keep pushing the theatrical components of revolution instead of doing the hard groundwork of truly revolutionizing the Black community and thus enacting Black liberatory struggle. So I think revolution will only manifest once our fundamental culture changes and our mental, or as our social theories and our worldview is transformed. And only then can we transform the material relationships and hierarchies that we're subjected to.
Yeah, I definitely don't have anything different to say than that. One of the things that I do remember though is I talk to the boys about this a lot, right? Like how everything is not going to be fun, everything is not going to be a game, everything is not going to be enjoyable, it's not going to always be good times. Some of this stuff is just work. And I think one of the things that we do a disservice to our community by doing is we keep trying to find all of these 400 different ways to engage. And I think that everybody has to engage in a way that they're comfortable engaging. But it's a whole lot of reading and talking and coming to positions and then holding those positions even in the faces of it being uncomfortable. And that's one of the things that I think is just hard for people to recognize is that help me clean this language up. It's easy to be oppressed. Like you can just get up and do damn near anything you want to do. You don't really have to. You know what you can't have. You know the ways to kind of weasel around to get those things that you're not supposed to have. But when you start talking about wanting to be free, the responsibility that come with that, the energy that you got to put into that, the way that like you kind of got to hold those lines in real and consistent ways, like all of those things, it ain't as fun as it seems, especially because now we largely try to do those things outside the community. And it makes it even harder to be the person that you're supposed to be because you're not in community trying to hold yourself to this standard.
Yeah, I think it's so brilliant that you said that it's easy to be oppressed. But that is a relatively new phenomenon. I know some people will think back to chattel slavery or Jim Crow and the era of lynching and discrimination. That they were like, oh yeah, but in this particular era, or this particular era of Black struggle, that's exactly the way they designed it. This book, Dr. Bobby E. Wright credits this book with single-handedly destroying, let me put it on the screen, with single-handedly destroying the Black liberation struggle. Where's that? Oh, here it is. He said this book, written by B.F. Skinner, the behavioralist, single-handedly. Oh, and you get it free? or is that just a sample? You know, oh, wow. Or at least you get a good sampling of the book. But anyway, this book single-handedly destroyed the civil rights movement, because in this book, which pretty much proposes the creation of what he called the technology of control, he came up with a way of basically saying that, how do you give people freedom and dignity and still enslave them? Or in his own words, the most efficient and complete way to enslave a man is to give him the impression that he's free. And they wrote the shit down and published it for public consumption. And so now you even have a lot of black people that say inaccurately, we are our own worst enemies. We do this to ourselves. That is a byproduct.
Bro.
That rhetoric, that rhetoric is a byproduct of B.F. Skinner's work.
Bro, I was talking to someone, and that person was telling me all of the things that white people had done to help them, and all of the things that black people had done to hurt them.
Yes.
And just kind of processing it. One of the things that someone, I was, complaining about it with, this person said to me, the only time white people gonna treat you like that is when they not threatened by you. Like when they know that you gonna stay in the role that they done already built for you, you're not gonna push against it. Man, they so easy going to get along with, and the thing that they want could be the most random of thing, and then you see them behave like no animal in the wild would. Like, it's just, I don't understand it. And the way that the people that talk the most about the way white people behave are the people that are around them the least. You don't
That's
even
where that
know.
fantasy came.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, not, boy, you don't be around them to know how they, you don't, like, nothing of this. Yeah. And in our community, I think one thing that we have to find a way to do better is to really present folks with options. I put in our chat that I want to get to, the chat. Excuse me. But, I forgot where it was, but the comment was something about, you get on the hamster wheel and you run. And I think that's what it is, right? Like, I think it is so easy for folk to just kind of have these fantasies about the way that white people behave. And then the way that you can be active is you can just push a button on your phone and now you're a revolutionary. Like, there's no difference between you and Asada Shakur. Like, you, sir, are Thomas Sankar, because you retweeted this thing 3 times and you made a video cursing about it. And I think we have to get to some point where, and I'm not the person to do it because I got off social media. Like, I'm not on any of that stuff. But the people that are still on it have to find ways to encourage people to get off of it, because that's not where the fight is. That might be one of the, go ahead.
I think that would be a strategic flaw.
No, I didn't finish. That is one of the places, that is a battleground, but that is not the only field that we fighting on, right? Because we live in these communities where we're so isolated. And I'm talking about isolated from the people that stay across the street from us, the people that stay next door to us, Like there isn't a real interaction, a conversation that we having with our neighbors
But
in real ways.
but that started before the implementation of social media. That was going on before MySpace. I mean, I've been organizing and working in the community before even MySpace was a thing, or even internet
Mm-hmm.
access was widely available. I think we like to. I was just showing. I gave my son an image, and it was a bus station. Let me see. Um, I'm gonna see if I don't know. I'm probably not gonna be able to find it, but uh, anyway, it was literally a image from a bus station, and it showed all the people looking at these little prompters, and there was another image of a commuter train, and everybody on the commuter train had their faces buried in a newspaper
Yeah. I've seen
or a
that
book.
image.
And so this alienation, Karl Marx predicted this before the first computer. I think before even the first those IBM card reader computers were even conceptualized. So I think that a lot of times it's very easy to scapegoat. Oh, it's the rap music or whatever new thing is around. We like to blame the old problems are on. Like when I was young, and hip hop was just becoming popularized, and a lot of the old heads, the people who had gray beards before I could grow a beard, they were, oh, this music is the reason why the young people are being disrespectful. And it wasn't the fact that our ancestors, our elders fought to integrate us in a culture and a society, a dog eat dog capitalist system, and betrayed the radicalism and traded liberation for integration. So, we're blaming the internet. When my sons have grandkids, they're gonna be blaming the holographic interface or whatever the technology is at that time. But we find that the only thing technology tends to do is make shit people are already doing more efficient. You know, technology doesn't enlighten people. I mean, my great grandmother, Grandma Bowie, she's like, oh, these kids listening to the sock hop. Kids listening to the radio. Back then, there was only AM radio. Now they have FM radio. Oh, the kids listening to these phonographs. So I think it's more in the the I think it's more embedded in. It goes deeper in the culture. I really don't think it's the technology. And to me, just rejecting social media as a tool would be akin to rejecting the printing press or the transistor radio or rejecting the drum. You know,
Yeah,
and
I don't
Marshall
think
McLuhan, huh?
I don't think that's my position.
Mm. No, I'm not saying that's your position, but just
Oh,
in
okay.
terms of, you know, devaluing the tool that is social media.
Right. I just think that I think there becomes a point where we I think there becomes a point where we think that is all that matters.
Yeah, some people do that. Yeah.
And one of the things that I've recognized as I've gotten older, especially being in a weird spot, right? Like I'm too old for young people, but still young enough to remember like old people ain't telling the whole truth, right? Like just in that weird spot. And at one place when I worked with a much younger group of folk, they would talk about how our audience is on social media. And I would always ask them, well, I don't know anybody that's spending what our budgets require, that's spending a whole lot of time looking for those things on social media. Like y'all might be doing that, but you know, y'all don't make the money that these other folks that had the positions where these folks make these decisions, right? Are. And I think I was missing, and I tend to miss some of the things that they're contributing there. I also think that they're missing the fact that not everyone is there. And I think in our community, we center young people. Yeah. We center young people in ways that doesn't honor all of the wisdom that came before them. And we just kind of disregard relationships and the value of all parts of our community, because it's just so much easier to hit a button on your phone and that be the end of it. And I think anyone that isn't really engaging with their neighbors, that isn't really, you know, like involved in their community, is doing a real disservice. Cause man, like that's where the work is. Cause that's what people are going to be connected to.
I agree with that, but I think that social media can be an asset in that. I still don't see how, because like a lot of these issues we're describing, a lot of these regressions, they predate social media. I remember people used to say the internet. They wouldn't say social media because social media sites
Didn't
weren't
exist yet.
dominating the internet. So people would say, oh, the internet's doing this. The internet's rewiring your brain, the internet. And now they say social media. They don't say the internet anymore. They say this specific component of the internet. And then because I mean, Twitter is already collapsing, and I'm pretty sure Facebook will go the way. I remember Netscape. So all these in these boom bust cycles of capitalism and the instability of capitalism, there will come a time like neither of my sons use Facebook, and whatever comes after that, we'll say it's that. But in all reality, even it's so funny to see white people talk about the pipeline, the radicalization pipeline, as if white people started being racist when Joe Rogan started his podcast. As if racism, I mean, if the internet's radicalizing white boys, then how did white folks become racist when all they had was Morse code? When they were being racist when they were
before they even had Morse code. You know what I'm saying? Man, like that's crazy.
Yeah. So, yeah, but I think we do agree that there is an erosion, but I think it's more so what happens is, and why we start to demonize particular technologies, is because capitalism captures them.
Mm-hmm.
So we have wonderful technologies, wonderful technological advancements in medicine, in computing, in transportation, in other forms of communication. We have wonderful forms of advancement, that things my great-grandfather never dreamed of. But then we come to hate those things, and we're like, well, it's the problem, all these cars on the road and the way the city. But the real problem is capitalism and white hegemony. And we scapegoat the other things. It's capitalism that's fucking up the internet. It's capitalism that's fucking us up. But we think it's not the internet. And the capitalists and then other people are like, oh, you talk about capitalism, throw away your iPhone. And capitalism did not give us the iPhone. Capitalism did not give us the internet. Capitalism did not give us, I mean, if you can name a valued technology, even in healthcare and medical care, X-rays and MRI machines, they were not the byproduct of some capitalist tinkering away. The light bulb, they even say, Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison had a whole laboratory, public funding, and dozens of other engineers and scientists working with him. And so our problem is with capitalism and white hegemony. And that's the thing, whether a brand new technology emerges tomorrow or the grid goes down and there's no more internet for the foreseeable future, we'll find that over centuries, with all these new technologies, the hierarchies don't change. The hierarchies never change because we tend to focus too much on scapegoating the technology as opposed to understanding that there's this undercurrent that's been here with us for, I mean, depending on what timeline you're using and what definitions you apply to, between 500 and 250 years of global white hegemony and capitalism. And it gets us rejecting and hating things we should otherwise, or we would otherwise embrace. You know, even up into all of the thick-headed idiots we encounter on the internet. They're indoctrinated and byproducts of capitalist mass indoctrination. Anyway, let's go to, do you want to get with it? Because you've highlighted quite a few comments and questions. So we can do those or go directly to opening up to people to chime in.
Open up, and then I think we open up first, and then if people slow down or whatever, then we can just kind of go back to some of those things.
Okay, I put the link in to come on live with me and my brother Skipp Coon. I put the link in the comments. You can come through with your questions, comments, and or criticisms. We want to get in as many people in as we can. So please try to be as direct and concise as possible. We'd like you to have your say, but just try to be concise. So if we do get a deluge of people, we can get as many people on. So, all right. We got a comment, Prester John. Maybe God needs some self-help books to manage all the jealousy. I'm not sure where that came from or where it's going. But you're the God expert. You're the representative of the Almighty on this show. So I'll let you take that one.
Okay.
No, you don't have any. You're not going to?
I just said okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Prester John. He's Prester John. So that's it, y'all. Oh, I guess people leaving us hanging because I don't see anything. You see any question, comments, or criticism? Oh, okay. We got another question for you. Yo, Skipp, I like your music, man. Is there more than 9 tracks on YouTube? Than the 9 tracks on YouTube?
Yeah, it's a lot of it, man. I don't know what's all like. So the first record was Women Revolution Tennis Shoes. Second record was Sophomore Slump. Third record was Miles Garvey. I'm not one of those guys.
That's my personal favorite.
Yeah, I'm not one of those guys that's gonna give you a record every year. I
don't have that put out the music. Yeah, see, too busy in these streets.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
He don't just talk it, he live it. So he too busy in the streets.
For real though.
God has chimed in and said that he's not DC Joe Black. God has spoken, and God said he's not jealous. Slow Down Brand Nubian. I'm not sure why he posted that, but I really like that song and all of its sexist and misogynistic glory. I love that song. Okay. What do y'all think of Huey P. Newton's essay, The Relevance of the Church?
I'm not hip. I'll be
send it to us.
Yeah,
I'll tell you that next time we go live. Send us a copy of it.
Yeah, I'll read that tomorrow.
We got a compliment.
Yeah, I think we really getting into our bag now. Like we had that fight.
We had a fight?
Yeah, man. Like I was super hot with you, bro.
See, I'm not one to hold grudges, you know.
Yeah, I was super hot. And like that's why I was real happy that I saw you when we were in Kansas City. Like it was like, okay, he just be on the internet doing internet shit. Like, cause I really don't.
What else can you do on the internet? I never understand that phrase. What
Hey
else
man,
can I do on the internet besides internet shit? Who's
hey
on the
bro,
internet doing other
listen,
than internet
listen.
shit?
I spend way too much money. Look at old football games,
That's not
and
internet shit.
nah, you be on like arguing with strangers, and I'm not finna do that. Like I'm not finna go back and forth with people. Like I'm not finna do that. Cause like I told you before, man, like man, I'm not finna do all that. I'm straight. So that's what I do on the internet. Like the way like y'all like even somebody in the chat was kind of trying to, you know what I'm saying, like poke. No, I'm straight, bro. Like I ain't getting into all that.
See, I'm like Monica. I'm a Monicaist. Just don't take it personal. Don't take it personal. Or that was Randy Jackson. I ain't gonna let Monica steal that from Randy Jackson.
Yeah. What do you think of this argument from crazy people about the origins of hip hop? I don't.
Where is that?
What you even on?
Oh, see, you getting way ahead. You want to ignore all the people that asked before that?
No,
Do you know anything, a book that talks about how racist football is?
Is that $40 million slaves?
That's all the sports. They even talk about the jockeys.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful book. He even went in on black jockeys. They don't even exist anymore. But I must say, why I want my screen share. Let me see. I don't know what's happening. Okay, let me try something. We do have a somebody who's okay. I think this is a site you go to. This is the only sports site I visit. edgeofsports.com.
Oh, I like that. Okay.
And it's Dave Zirin. He's the only person I can listen talk about sports. This is Jared Ball's homeboy.
Okay.
He's the only brother I know that got white homeboys. So
this guy, shout out to Mike, shout out to Will. You know what I'm saying? To my boys, man.
You got white homeboys too?
Yeah, man.
You and Jared, okay.
Dang.
I have white colleagues.
Yeah, no,
like I have white colleagues.
Bro, like I really be in my community though. Like I really be outside. You know what I'm saying? So
your community gentrifying too. But anyway, if there you could be. I'm not sure what book you're referring to, Toheeb, but this book, Edge of Sports. Should we bring in our caller?
Let's do it.
What I don't know how to say their name. Maito. Hello, Maito, you're live. Maito. Okay, I was close. Sorry.
Hey, what's going on, brothers? You guys sound really choppy, so I'm not sure if I'm clear or not. Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Super clear.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
Okay. I hope I'm clear. Okay, yeah. So a couple of things, man. Before I ask my question, I just want to.
Okay, now you're choppy. Maito. Okay, I think we lost you. Try to chime back in. I'm gonna go ahead and caller, thou art loosed. Try to call back in. Maybe we'll get a better connection. Sorry about that. I was very excited to hear what he had to say. It looked like he was about to get Ray, he wants to know where he can find your music. And I'm gonna bring Maito back on. Hey, Maito?
Yeah, I'm back now, man.
Okay, let's try again.
Can you hear me?
Question, comment, criticism. Yep.
Well, I just got it.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I just wanted to appreciate the work, man. And Brother Skipp, man, I play your music on my radio station. Looking forward to some new stuff. Brother Diallo, hope you don't mind, man. I'd like to clip some of your words and blend it into the mix. But my question is concerning, I'm the one that wrote the question concerning revolutionary violence. I'm 100% unapologetically down with revolutionary violence. But when I was in a discussion, we're looking at what's happening in Palestine now, being a dialectical process. How do we evaluate this, man? Like with modern day, the savagery of the system, does the guerrillas, do we launch an attack without some type of knowledge, participation of the masses? Do we just launch it and then leave the masses completely vulnerable to what we see, like the savagery of this retaliation? I hope you understand the question. It's not a pullback or a slight criticism of what Hamas has done. I'm with it. But I'm saying, as time moves on, what is our analysis of that internally? How do we think about how we move forward, how we launch attacks, and what will it lead to the masses of the people who are unsuspecting of what's about to come? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I grasp what you're asking, but here's the thing about revolutionary violence. It has to be accompanied by revolutionary analysis, revolutionary ideology, revolutionary scholarship, revolutionary organizing, revolutionary outreach, revolutionary institution building, revolutionary services and support. Violence is just one component of a revolution. Just like our oppressors don't just engage in violence. The systems and institutions of capitalism and white hegemony, imperialism, they don't just do violence. And again, I think we kind of have this Hollywood perception of what revolution is: explosions and heroes and fists and symbols and flags. But revolution is an intellectual endeavor. And if you look at the systems and institutions of capitalism, they have a whole infrastructure and apparatus. They have strategies and tactics. So depending on what stage of the revolution you are in, what region in terms of when to engage in violence and what type of violence you engage in, will be determined by your analysis, your objective, the interest at play, the risk that want to be taken on, the level and depth of cultivation of revolutionary ideology. Therefore, in terms of the level of loyalty, commitment, and sacrifice each individual in the work, how stratified is it in terms of what components do you have? Do you have the capacity to distribute resources across physical space, or to maneuver or to deflect counterattacks? So violence must be embedded, and then revolutionary peaceful means in terms of outreach and development and relationship development, in terms of feeding people. So violence in the context of revolution or liberatory violence has to be one component of a much larger network that it takes to build. You have to build up, train, cultivate to get to violence. So that will be informed by the analysis. So even when you say, if you look at the Black Panther Party, I think is probably the best example of its evolution from a organization that was helping children, literally being crossing guards. The Black Panther Party started off with study groups and being crossing guards and a lunch program, and evolved into the Black guerrilla family and the Black Liberation Army, where they were an armed faction. And they had global factions, like in coordinating with the Viet Cong in Vietnam, where the ambassador, they were sending ambassadors to talk to guerrilla forces in Vietnam and Latin America. But they evolved to that point. They didn't just, even when they were carrying the guns, before they carried the guns, Huey P. Newton, it's Dr. Huey P. Newton. Bobby Seale, which we talk, he's still with us. He was an engineering student. Huey P. Newton was an academic. Kwame Ture was a medical student, and he left. I mean, so these are people who engaged in liberatory violence and advocated and organized for liberatory violence after they laid the groundwork. Because other than that, you're engaged in what is called emergency compensatory violence, meaning you're just lashing out. And I don't condemn that any more than I condemn revolutionary violence. But you can't call your violence revolutionary if it's not embedded within a greater revolutionary apparatus, organization, and it is guided by revolutionary ideology, analysis, fact-based evidence analysis. Violence unto itself, violence that may be justified or understandable because of the oppression, can't be defined as revolutionary violence unless that particular act of violence is, number one, sustainable, and number two, advances, or at least has the great potential to advance a revolutionary struggle. I'm sorry for the long-winded answer, but I think we way too casual with the concepts of violence.
I just want to add briefly, when you talk about the masses, I just think that's a fleeting idea. I don't know. Like I think if the 12 of us get in this room and decide we're gonna do something, our families are the masses. Like those are the people that we come in contact with. Like I don't think we had a liberty of sitting around and trying to, elect people to go out and fight. I think we just fight, and that's what the guerrilla strategy is. Like you fight everybody. So yeah.
And I think I'm sorry.
No, I didn't know you were gonna continue this. I was gonna say something to Ray, so just let me know when you finish so I can respond to Ray.
No, go on.
Okay. Hey Ray, it's Tibbit, TIBBIT.bandcamp.com. That's what everything is. So listen over there. Have fun. I tried to post it in the chat at least 4 times, and they keep saying I can't post. So I don't know what's going on.
And there's another book that I think really clarifies this. I want to share, and you can get this free online. Well, that I think really talks about revolution and violence. I'm just going to throw it up. And this is also, oh, wait. Goddamn computers. You see it now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is Bits and Pieces, which is basically a pamphlet written by Sundiata Acoli. But what page is that on? A brief history. Okay, I think it's page 12. If you go to page 12, no, it's not page 12. Where the hell? Oh, here it is. Page 18. Where he talks about the positive aspects of the Black Panther Party's contribution, where he talks about ideology, methodology, strategy, tactics, and violence in particular. And when was it appropriate violence versus inappropriate violence? So the positive aspects of the Black Panther contribution and the negative aspects of Black Panther's contribution. And each of those, even though it's a paragraph, you can expand on them. So, and he touches on where the Black Panthers went wrong in terms of their rhetoric and posturing around violence. So this is Bits and Pieces, and it's free online, archive.org. I'll share that in the comment section. But I think that would also I was about to call the brother mitosis, but our former caller, if you could check that out. What warrior doesn't have strategy and tactics? I would say probably most warriors don't, depending on how you define warrior, because most U.S. soldiers, they're over there fighting for tuition. and killing people they don't understand the ideology that drives them.
And on the cool, they ain't even fighting for tuition, man. They just out there trying to get back home.
Well, they enlist for tuition.
Yeah.
Or a car note. So you can be quote unquote a warrior, but a lot of people have different definitions. Black Wolf, do you believe Palestine did all those things that you just named, or did they just go handle some business? They absolutely did everything. What you're looking at in Palestine was not a singular act. You have to know the history of Yasser Arafat and the PLO. I'm sorry to keep going because it's just kind of hard to.
No, this is good.
There's this book called Gorillas that I reference a lot that has a whole section on John Lee Anderson. He's a known. I can't enlarge it. But no, this is part of this was actually founded. The PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, was founded by Yasser Arafat and other scholars and elites. Yasser Arafat, again, was an engineer like Bobby Seals, people who were basically formerly trained in analysis, systems analysis, critique, and constructing and deconstructing systems. And it's part of what is called the Intifada. And the Intifada is part of a larger cultural movement. So it's the West that says Hamas. If you engage with Palestinians, they will not say Hamas is attacking Israel. Every Palestinian on the ground there, or ally of the Palestinian, and Palestinians that I know and engage with here, said that no, this is a Palestinian struggle, and Palestinians are taking action and rebelling and rising up. Only the West has to appear. You'll notice, like when the United States invaded Panama, they didn't say we're invading Panama. They said we're going after Noriega. When they invaded Afghanistan, they said we're going after the Taliban. When they invaded Iraq, we're going after Saddam Hussein. They always try to reduce an entire nation. They always try to reduce an entire nation down to one individual or one organization, to scapegoat and to make them the reason they're doing these attacks. But when they're attacking the whole community, even when they come into my community, we have extremely aggressive and belligerent police in the Chicago PD. I've been accosted by the Chicago Police Department while I'm literally just doing nothing in the work, trying to do some organic gardening and trying to organize for nothing but positive, lawful things in my community. And they say they're here because of the BDs or the GDs. So they reduced the entire south side of Chicago and southwest and the west side of Chicago down to 2 or 3 gangs, when less than 1% of the community is an active member of that particular group. So no, the Palestinians didn't just handle their business. The Palestinians have been engaged in organized rebellion and have been engaged in various tactics and levels of intensity for decades. And the Hamas, or whatever you want to call it, the PLO, or whatever individuals they want, that's the West interpretation. They always want to simplify it down to good guys and bad guys. We have, even in Africa, when the decolonial struggles was going on in Africa, they'd be talking about there's warlords and thugs in Africa. And we have to go to Africa to stop the warlord. We have to go to Africa to stop Idi Amin. And they reduce an entire region, an entire continent down to 1 or 2 people or 1 or 2 organizations. Not that you're doing that or saying they're doing that, but no, the Palestinians have engaged in, if you go online, like I said, I was just talking to, I guess I could say her name, Dr. Hana Massoud, who is a Palestinian revolutionary scholar. The Palestine struggle has scholarship. They have journalists. They have cultural icons engaged in the struggle, music, their food, and even the way they structure their families. This was not just a group of people or just a whole nation of people decide, let's all handle our business. No, this is an ongoing, what they call a protracted struggle. So don't think that if you just go out and start blasting tomorrow, you're doing the same thing those people did, because you are not. That's not how it goes. That's just the part they report on. The U.S. wants to think, oh, these are just people who woke up one day and chose violence, as opposed to these people who have been organizing, advocating, expanding, strategizing, and implementing a wide array of means and employing every tactic and utilizing all resources at their disposal, violent and nonviolent, direct and indirect, surface and underground. I guess. I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm tripping with these long-winded answers. Oh, Black Wolf, stop it. The black electric car was around before Bobby Seale was born. Stop.
Wasn't the first car electric?
Yes. In fact, up until the oil industry's manipulation of federal policy, electric cars outnumbered gas powered vehicles. There's a documentary on that.
Who killed the electric car or something like that?
Death of the Electric Car.
Yeah, Death of the Electric
Car. Or Who Killed the Electric Car. Yes, that's the name of it.
Yeah.
I'll share that. But that actually was a pretty well done and comprehensive documentary, Who Killed the Electric Car. And so I would love to be able to give Bobby Seale credit for that, but we have to. Oh, Lord. Anyway, we're over time.
Yeah.
So we're going to wrap this up. Thank you for everyone who made contributions.
Finger guns.
Finger guns. That's a way of flirting.
Well, finger guns?
That's flirtation.
Yo, bro, you got to get out of Chicago. You got to get out of Chicago.
I was just saying.
I don't be sleep. I do be sleepy, though.
Oh, you Southern.
Yeah.
Y'all do from can to can't. Y'all rise with the sun and y'all go down. I know. That's Southern way. That's slow Southern life, man.
Burhan, Israel Bell, George Jackson, Ashada Shakur, Ready for Revolution, Kwame Ture, Michael Thelwell, Black Power. Yeah, but yeah.
There's another book called Black People's Prison Survival Guide. But that was I think I got copies left. But there, if you can find it, Black People's Prison Survival Guide. I didn't survive reading the book. Black People's Prison Survival Guide, yes. By Abdullah Ibrahim, published in 2003. You can get a free copy or an online copy at Boston Anarchist Books. But yeah, I've read this through. I should do a review on this. And the brother says in the introduction, it's really a tragedy that this book is necessary, but it's still nonetheless necessary. So I just shared that, Bruham Bell. I just set up a link so you can just print it, because I think it's public. It's a fairly short book. I mean, I don't if it qualifies as a book. It's more of a pamphlet, but that's very good reading for newly incarcerated. I guess you wouldn't give it to anybody that's been back there for a minute. But anyway, it talks about the different. I mean, it's just a good read to anybody, whether you plan on going to jail or not, which is kind of stupid because I don't know anybody. I know a lot of people that have been to jail, and I don't know one of them who had planned on it. So anyway, can you please close us out? Or unless you have something to announce.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your love. Thank you. As we grow, as we learn, as we move, keep us centered in you. Keep your people first on our minds, and give us the courage to do the things that you call us to do. Amen.
All right. So, I have a 9 o'clock appointment
Tonight?
I got to talk to some cats in Nebraska.
Okay.
You know, it's black people in Nebraska. You got to be a bad brother. I thought you had to be tough to be black in the South. Oh shit,
Nebraska, boy. Look, man. Every time somebody talk about Nebraska, I think about Bud Crawford and Malcolm X.
Yeah, I got to get on the phone to Nebraska. He was patient. He must know I'm still alive because he ain't called me. Anyway, yeah, I got some things happening, trying to organize and work.
Nebraska. Let me know, bro.
Can't be Pan-African. That don't just mean going to Africa. That means going wherever you find black people.
Facts.
Anyway, bro, as always, it's a pleasure. I appreciate you, brother.
Hey, man, I love you, man. I appreciate you, too.
All right, peace.